Hello everyone, my name is Michael Ryan. I'm the head of BAA Training and we are gathered here today to have a discussion about what positions will be in need post COVID-19 and how to prepare for them. And I'm joined today by three very distinguished speakers or panelists. I have with me today Chris Smith, a senior lecturer and pilot wellness manager at Jetstar Airlines in Australia. I'm joined as well by Vicky Steel, the international customer experience with Qantas Airlines, and Raj Raghavan, from the senior vice president and head of HR in Indigo. Thank you very much for joining me today and for our discussion. So hopefully people will find this of great interest. And they'll have some sort of, given your insights into the aviation industry, they'll be a little bit better off having listened to our discussion today. I suppose I'd like to begin. I mean, I've given out a couple of questions, which I think is very relevant. I'm very conscious that nobody has a crystal ball and nobody has ever seen anything to hit the aviation industry just like what we've experienced. But I suppose your insights and everything would be of benefit to people. I'd like to begin by probably as kind of an introduction question about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected your airline and the airlines in your region. And I suppose, ladies first, I start with you, Vicky, if I could, please. How has it affected you down in Australia?
You have to unmute yourself, Vicky.
Yeah, we're having difficulty hearing you.
And there we go. Okay.
That's
yeah,
great.
Sure. So hi, everyone. This is my own personal opinion of what's going on. I haven't been given permission by Qantas to speak on behalf of them because everyone is on stand down right now. So the people that needed to sign off on me to represent Qantas today haven't unfortunately got back to me. So just from my own personal perspective, we have over 25,000 team of 25,000 crew, operational staff, from ground staff, pilots, administrative staff, all on stand down. And we have a skeleton staff that are maintaining some type of administration role. Our senior management team are obviously still functioning and trying to work on a step ahead, moving forward with what the governments are allowing, which are changing on a regular basis. So we're at full standby basically to kick off domestically, hopefully within the next few weeks as soon as borders open up. But from an international perspective, we're probably looking at least 6 to 9 months before we'll be able to kick off successfully and push forward past COVID-19. We're probably looking at a good 12-month period from an international perspective.
Okay, out of those 25,000, Vicky, pilots, do you expect all of your pilots to return to work after COVID-19?
Yeah, I believe so. The forecast and the public opinion poll is that there is still a high demand for travel, both domestically and internationally. And so, we are looking at new aircraft as well. There will be new opportunity for redeployment of staff. So there will most certainly be some type of restructuring opportunity. We were already looking forward to Project Sunrise, which included the longer trips, 18-hour flights, 20-hour flights from Sydney to Chicago and other parts of Europe. And so, we're still going to be pushing forward with Project Sunrise, and that will possibly be on new aircraft that we're negotiating deals with at the moment. So there's definitely room for movement within our technical departments.
Okay,
sure.
So I take it then from your perspective, again, it's your personal perspective, that it's a very positive attitude you have. So the new normal will include most pilots returning to work.
Yeah, definitely. I think flexibility is a really important issue that all staff need to understand. And, for example, we're retiring a number of aircraft, a number of fleets. So those pilots that are dedicated to those aircraft will need to seek employment again. We don't want to lose that professional body that we have. Our pilots are extremely well trained. We really don't want to see anyone let go, for example. We'll offer again natural attrition and also a redundancy packages will be pushed forward. But yeah, we don't see that it's a negative aspect, but there will be changes within EBAs and restructuring of teams to ensure that we basically are going to meet from a cost basis point of view. We do have to reduce our cost base, and our workforce is one of our most expensive costs and the most easiest to reduce. So definitely, there will be a lot of restructuring going on, is my opinion. But still jobs, and jobs is good.
yeah, indeed. Okay, yeah. Thanks very much, Vicky.
Sure.
Chris, same questions to you. I mean, what has happened in Jetstar, and what has happened to the pilot cadre that works in Jetstar?
Yeah, Michael, thank you, and thank you, Vicky, as well, because we're basically under a similar umbrella, Vicky, aren't we?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Look, essentially, the operations ceased, and the company is very proactive from that point of view, essentially to stop any excessive bleeding of money and outflow of cash, and they did a really good job of that. Lots of communication with our pilot group and all staff for that matter. I come at it from a few different angles, Michael, because managerially, so I'm on a rotational standout basis, so I actually have there's three components to what I do. So I'm still doing some active flying, not at the moment, but that's what I do. The other part is I have a very large mental health role within our company. And then, of course, I work for University of Southern Queensland. So with the university, we are actually training pilots. That's what we do. And we're very optimistic from that point of view. So I'm coming here from both sides here. From our point of view, from a university point of view, we're very bullish about the next 5 years. I mean, history tells us that there will be a significant upturn. It'll be slow for a while, but the upturn will be quite marked. There'll be a number of people I expect will leave the industry, which usually happens through times like this. But we're actually in the process of restarting some flying currently, and we're moving to 15 to 40% next month. So that's where we're basically at. And I guess it's very easy, I think, to mistake pessimism for realism in these times. But the truth is, of course, I think the reality is this is where the entrepreneurship actually starts to shine. This is fertile ground for entrepreneurship. So we're about to see them emerge shortly. The downturns or the change in industry structure or any unexpected event like this really brings out those people. So I think we're already starting to see that. It won't be just, I think the growth will not be just reactive to economic climatic conditions, because entrepreneurship will actually drive demand. They want to create the demand. So I'm probably quite bullish about the next 5 years or so. Our students through the university are basically 3-year courses. So this first year will be out in about 3 years' time. And I actually think this is a very good time for them to be entering the industry, to be emerging in a few years' time.
Interesting. A very positive sign from down the Australia-New Zealand area. I was just noticing that New Zealand is COVID-free. I think they've boasted about being COVID-free. So hopefully it's working its way across the world towards us. That's good.
Well, Australia shut down very quickly. They did a good job. I think the government did a good job here and shut down the borders very rapidly in order to get on top of the spread of the virus. And I think it's pretty well recognised. You're right, New Zealand did a great job, and I think Australia's done it as well.
It helps being on an island. I know myself.
It does. And there is quite a lot of pressure now from business and industry of all kinds to actually start to open up the borders now. But I guess, understandably, leaders are worried about a second wave, and they're being very cautious about that. But
indeed.
Overall, good job.
So, Raj, over to you. We're working our way across the world. What about you? Indigo holds quite a big share of the market in India. So how has it affected India and COVID-19?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's great to be on this panel today. As you said, I'm not a futurist by qualification, but the panel has excellent credentials, including 3 of you who have done phenomenal work globally. As far as India, Mike, the country went on a lockdown starting 25th of March. And today we are technically still in a lockdown, but things started getting loosened up a little bit. So flying started in somewhat a measured way about 2 weeks ago, May 25th to be precise. Just to give you a context, at the best of times, Indigo did approximately 1,800 departures a day, both domestic and internationally. The country has now started in a very small way, as I said. All the departures together is about 600. And Indigo does about 340, give or take a few here or there. We do believe that the domestic consumption in India is going to really come in handy, much like I think Australia or the United States or regional travel in Europe. I think the domestic capacity, domestic consumption will work, as we have seen even with China, who is apparently back in full swing. They were first to get into COVID and probably the first to come out of it. I also saw Vietnam come back. So in the last 2 weeks, the positive story, Mike, is as far as Indigo is concerned, our load factor went up from about 50% when we started to about 70% today. Although the number of flights we are flying is a fraction of what it used to be before. The good part is we all thought this was pent-up demand of people wanting to go back to their homes because they were locked down for 2 months, but it does appear that it's just not pent-up demand, but slowly and steadily regular flying will come back. So I think it's a lot to do with consumer behavior, customer confidence in terms of airplanes being a safe place to do their travel in. And there has been a lot of positive press in terms of why a plane is the last place you will catch a COVID in. As far as Indigo is concerned, Mike, we believe that cash reserves will be king for 2020 and 21, even more than just profitability. And much like Vicky was saying, we are going to take several actions to take cost out, which also means several of us have taken pay cuts. About half the company has taken pay cuts. And we also instituted a furlough or a leave without pay plan. But in all of this, as the head of HR, my team and I are very focused on managing employee engagement, morale, health, especially mental and emotional health. And I think that's going to be a big component. So what happens in India, Mike, is if there is a passenger that's found COVID positive, the crew, both the cabin crew and
I'm
the
losing
crew.
Raj there.
Okay, can you hear me now, or? Am I not audible at all?
Raj, I can hear you still. I can't hear. Mike's frozen.
Okay,
yeah.
Mine just lost there for a minute. I'm back now.
Yeah, you're back now. You're back now.
I just froze for a minute. Sorry, Raj. You were there saying that. Lost the last minute.
Yeah, I was talking about employee engagement, morale, health, emotional health, and all of that. In India, when a COVID positive passenger is identified, we are grounding the crew for 2 weeks, both the cabin crew and the cockpit crew. So that has two things. One is availability of crew, and number two, their own mental health. And I think a lot of these are being handled by us even as we talk today. And I think going forward, there's going to be a lot in terms of reorganizing the company itself. And I think human resource expertise in reorganizing, and to the extent mergers and acquisitions will all come in handy. At these times, one of the things my executive committee, our CEO, the board, all of us are committed on is to double down on talent management and employee experience, especially employee engagement. We need to keep a look on what people are saying. We are not organized yet. We want to be on top of things. So a bunch of prerogatives for us to be dealing with, Mike.
Okay, it's from a European perspective. It seems to be somewhat similar. I find personally, and there's an awful lot of negativity. There's a constant list of companies that are impending to close down, or there's going to lay off pilots, and I'm dealing specifically with training of pilots, and it's very, very difficult to try and entice pilots into a training environment when you hear all this negativity in the industry. So I'm trying to portray an upbeat message for them. But I think now is the time to be getting into training, because the crisis is now. In 2 years' time, when you finish your training, the crisis will have passed. And you'll be in a better position to start, to be recruited by Qantas or to be recruited by Indigo, and the airlines will at that stage will be on the upslope from the crisis. It's good to see there are green shoots from all of what you were saying. That airlines are starting to start off their domestic services, work within their borders, work within the regions that they can work within where the borders have closed down. So that's an interesting point. The next question I'd like to move on to ask is, with the return to service, do you see, and again, it's in your opinion, do you see a recruitment drive, or when would you see a recruitment drive? I know that some of you have referred to the fact that some people may leave the industry as a result of this. So in your opinion, when do you think that we will start to see the first green shoots of airlines advertising? I know that we see some of them already in China looking for pilots. Will we see a recruitment drive coming along again? Can we go back to Vicky again to start with? So we'll start in Australia and work our way west.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Mike, Qantas is a very large airline, and we're very lucky in Australia. We have both the domestic routes and the international routes that we are continually expanding, and with the affiliation with Jetstar, which I'll let Chris speak of. We're very, very lucky that we do have the scope and ability to be able to offer such a continued recruitment drive. I wouldn't say that necessarily in the short term there's going to be a recruitment drive, say for example in the first 12 months. It will be more of a reshuffle of the people that we have, but certainly within the next 12 to 18 months we do expect that air travel will have picked up and recovered quite dramatically by then. And unfortunately our friends at Virgin are struggling to keep their heads above water. I can't speak for them at all, but and Australia, I doubt that will allow anyone would allow Australia just to have one main airline. Qantas, of course, would love that, but someone else will pop up into the woodworks, whether or not it's Virgin or someone else has taken over Virgin. But so there is an opportunity for Qantas to continue to drive passenger air travel. There is the confidence of the Australians behind 100% backing Qantas and Jetstar. We have an amazing reputation in Australia from a safety perspective. We do have a huge loyalty following along with our frequent flyer program. Domestically as well as internationally. So, and then within the One World Alliance, for example, we continue to explore those opportunities as well. So we can only see positivity ahead. The next 12 months to 18 months will, of course, be the most difficult time to recover from COVID-19. But once that recovery has occurred, so long as nothing else then steps in and causes such disruption, we do see smooth waters and an opportunity to continue to explore opportunity into Project Sunrise and beyond, and then also too with the resourcing of newer aircraft, and the retirement of older fleets, we're continually becoming more innovative, more environmentally friendly, more economic, so there's so much opportunity for us in the next 12 to 18 months to really take this time now to get rid of the old wood, to really look at what we have within our asset portfolio and work our 787s, which is what we've been doing. They're our most efficient aircraft, for example. We haven't been flying the A380s because they're, a very large drain on the economy of Qantas. So, I think it's a very positive outlook once we get through this next 12 to 18 months. But I know that Alan Joyce, from what he's said publicly, he's very positive in what we've got to look forward to. So that's great.
Good. What about Jetstar, Chris? What will happen recruitment-wise there? Do you think that it'll be a further out, or do you think it'll be quite soon that they'll be starting to look for pilots?
As you say, Michael, it's a little bit of a crystal ball picture. However, I tend to agree with your time frame. I actually think my own view would be 2022 would be a very different story. And that's about 18 months away, a really different story. This would be, in my, dare I say, 40-year career, I should stop saying that, but I've had about three major events through that period,
Yeah.
But it's almost, it's to a T. The bounce back certainly comes out much more strongly than most people realise, and the bigger the downturn, the bigger the upswing, if you like. And it's not to be underestimated, I guess, the degree to which people do leave the industry, and they leave for a number of reasons. It's not always because there isn't a job, but they decide they're going to do something else, or they might move into another branch within this industry. That's quite marked, actually, and people don't actually realise at the time that they would do it, and then they decide to do that. For some, unfortunately, it doesn't. The new regime doesn't really match, the new environment doesn't match, they move on anyway. But most of the pilots, I think, that we have will be available for restart, and I think that would be the case with most airlines here. Certainly the domestic scene is about to kick off here progressively. International, I estimate probably not till next year, but when that does, that'll soak up a lot of pilots here as well. So we certainly wouldn't have a supply problem at the moment. That would be a different story from 2022. And I really agree with your sentiments. Great time to be actually learning to fly. I guess there's a little bit of experience in that, isn't there? That we actually know that's the case, but sometimes it's hard for people to realise that there is going to be an upswing. Yeah. It's a little like buying at the bottom of the share market, isn't it? But there's inevitably there is one. But that's for us to actually mentor, I think, the younger generation of pilots here. And certainly I'm dealing with those people heavily right now. Yeah,
thank you. Raj, for you, it's a huge airline, Indigo. There's over 260 airplanes, and will there be a big recruitment drive? I'm sure there's going to be the HR department in Indigo will be dispatching its interviewers out to keep those aircraft flying. That'll happen fairly soon, surely.
Absolutely, and we'd love for that to happen, Mike. How soon that'll happen is a question, and I think it all depends on how quickly we get to some kind of original capacity. In my mind, much like what Vicky and Chris said, our capacity is probably 12 to 18 months away, and which means that I'm going to have excess headcount, but we would much rather have that than let them go. If you look at regionally, Mike, yesterday, Emirates announced 600 separations of pilots. A week ago, Air Arabia did something similar. So there's, I think where the country or the airline is predominantly focused on international flying, there's going to be some amount of impact. Where there is a one-stop international, I think it's still going to be better off. See, as a passenger, I don't want to be flying in via someplace and then get stuck there because someone's going to find me COVID positive. So all of this is going to determine when our capacity comes back, and the capacity then determines how much hiring is going to happen. At this time, we haven't done any layoffs other than putting our expat pilots on notice, but that's a very small population as compared to the 4,000 pilots that we have. And also, Mike, for the last 3 or 4 years, we have been doing our own farming, if I were to say that. We have a very robust cadet program. We have a tie-up with six different schools internationally where our cadets go and train, and then we have the first right to hire them as junior first officers. So we are continuing to invest in that. We have junior first officers that are starting. So at some point in time, much to what Chris said, probably 2022 or 2023, we may have to go outside. But by then, my intent is to see how quickly I can develop my own food or reap the benefits of my own, sowing the seeds at the right time. So what I don't want to be doing is to go all over the world hiring for hundreds and hundreds of people when I know that I have the time now to kind of go develop, our own pilots, and that's something we are all looking forward to, being busy hiring again. But at this time, we are very focused on reorganizing and employee engagement and getting our planes back flying.
Yeah, like as I said, as I explained, being head of training in an ATO, an approved training organization, I would see that, as I said, now is the time to get into it. But it's managing to convince the kind of the teenagers or the young 20-year-olds to get into the training environment now, knowing that the airlines will be recruiting. It's I think it goes back to maybe 2008 when we had the financial crisis here in Europe. It was just nobody was willing to get into the construction business because the construction business was probably the most heavily hit. Yet within about 2 years, there was a huge shortfall in architects and people involved in the building trade. So it's now is the time to try and recruit and to tell these young people that yes, aviation will turn around, and it's a convincing of that. The next question I'd like to talk about is that there are going to be layoffs. They're certainly highlighting it an awful lot here in Europe. As people who are involved in aviation, what would you say to an individual who finds himself? I know, Chris, you kind of highlighted it. Maybe it's time for them to move on into something else and maybe have a look at some other industry. But what would you say to about maybe upskilling, or for pilots to get into maybe go back to flying schools or to become a trainer in some form or other? What sort of upskilling would you recommend, or what would you say to pilots who are being furloughed? Can I start again with you, Vicky?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So Qantas have been running a secondary employment program offering all of our employees who have been stood down the opportunity to train complementary within a particular area, and those areas have been around IT, security, HR. There's every pillar basically, because a lot of the organisations, not just obviously airlines, have been affected by COVID-19. So, for example, Telstra here in Australia, one of their call centres was situated overseas. Now that call centre was closed down pretty quickly, and very quickly they needed to establish a call centre here in Australia to take over those roles. So Qantas was really quick to actually accommodate a lot of our employees into a redeployment program through companies such as Woolworths, Telstra, and a number of others, and are still ongoing and continually looking to offer redeployment to, or secondary employment to all of our staff, which has been amazing. And the continued conversation every week, there's updates, there's our HR department is open and open for business and ready to help any employee who needs the help with their resume or upskilling, moving into a new area, taking the opportunity to do something that maybe they just haven't had time to do all their life because they've been flying and they've been overseas for 90% of their life, and all of a sudden they're on stand down now with all this time on their hands. So it has been an opportunity for people to redevelop themselves and explore themselves and see where their strengths are and what they've been missing out on. So it's been very positive at Qantas from an employment point of view. And in Australia, we have JobKeeper rather than furlough, so it's a similar scenario. And at this stage, we've got JobKeeper until September, so all of our employees are on JobKeeper, and then getting the top up of a secondary employment, which is fantastic. So we couldn't have asked more of Qantas and our HR team to assist our employees in asserting themselves to find new roles or to look for new interests. So we just hope we don't lose too many of them when it's time to come back.
Indeed, yeah. What about you, Chris?
To me, this is the era of the double qualification. This is the era of the non-linear career, not just a linear career. So we know that the industry has peaks and troughs, and they can be quite marked. That's always been a concern for pilots, hasn't it? That their qualification can be all or nothing. But to smooth those troughs out and to reduce the concern attached to those which may impact upon their ability to look after their families, their own career, their own job satisfaction, I really recommend double qualification. That doesn't mean external to the industry, it can mean internal. And this goes for new students who I'm dealing with now, master students. It also goes for mature age people. In other words, people who've been flying for a long time. I went back to university when I was 38, and started there, and I'm still there, So and it's been a really great avenue for me. But therefore, I really encourage people to look at what makes them tick, what it is, whether it's safety management, industrial relations, psychology, and link that to this career. For example, the mental health area for the moment is a very big growth area within all industries, particularly in the last 15, 20 years. We're actually talking about that, but how you actually apply that, which is where my interest came from, and that's my current study, higher research study attached to that. So those sorts of programs are now, as you know, are mandated across Europe, and because we've had those peer support programs here for a long time. So I look after, for example, that area right across our businesses in Japan and Singapore and Vietnam, New Zealand and Australia as well. That's my responsibility. But that has built, I've got to say to you, such a wonderful avenue for me. And I actually strongly suggest that people actually look at those. For example, the younger students, when they're learning to fly and looking at and running through their theory subjects, to actually see what sparks them as well. You may not pursue it now, but certainly pursue it later. And it's often applicable inside and outside the industry. So the non-linear career path for me, I strongly recommend that, which means a linear career basically straight up the normal line, so trainer captain, check captain, that line, which is fine. But also, if you've got another interest in safety investigation, IR, it doesn't matter what it is. Generally these days, you can build that into your career somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, Raj, same question to you about what you think. What's your opinion on that?
I think what Chris has just said makes a lot of sense. I would call it Uberization of employment. A couple of weeks ago, Mike, I was talking to a young student of management in a local school who I mentor. And she was asking me, Raj, you've been in HR 30 years. Firstly, I don't think I can do that, 30 years. Secondly, I don't even know if I'm going to survive that long. But I like music. I like to cook. I like to bake. I like HR as well. So do you think I can have a career where I can do all these four? I said, oh, really? I don't know. But you can certainly do HR in 2-3 different companies. But I think there's going to be a time, Mike, when people are going to say, I'm not going to just sing in a pub for the weekend, but I'm probably going to do it every day of the week. And during the day, if you can let me do flying, I can. As far as Indigo is concerned, there are a lot of skills that we locally train for. We run probably one of the largest training schools, aviation in this part of the world ever has. And some skills are not even taught in any school. For example, network planning, revenue management, operations control centers. I'm not even talking about the pilots or the engineers here. I think these are things that my talent management team is going to double down on. Can I get people who are interested in learning network planning but are currently pilots? For all you know, they may not want to do it, but there could be an engineer that wants to do it. So we are looking at all kinds of opportunities and possibilities at this time, including possibilities of can I be a part-time worker, a gig worker, if not an Uberization possibility.
Okay, it's interesting. I was a late starter in my master's. I went off to the City University in London and I studied my master's, but I only qualified from that last year. But I think it's one of the great things is that while you have time as a pilot, is probably to diversify into something else, is to, like you say, the accident investigation, safety, human resources, other areas that are available to pilots and are part of the industry. I suppose it's probably considering that we've had volcanic ash over here in Europe, but we've had the September the 11th, we've had these crises coming along, SARS crisis coming along as well. These kind of things teach pilots not to be kind of just one skilled or having just one string to their bow. They probably need to kind of diversify a small bit and get other things. But I certainly think from a training point of view, now is the time for pilots probably to look at probably upskilling. They have time in their hands. They may not have the finances, but if they can in any way at all, is probably try to upskill. I'd like to move on next to the next question, and this is probably crystal ball time. I know that we don't have one, but we've seen a huge trend and huge expansion, and I referred back to IATA and their vision for 2050 and the constant curve as it rises all the time. Do you think that this COVID-19 will be a blip and that we will return to the graph, the high angled graph of recruitment and pilots? Or do you think that there will be a complete change? Do you think that there will be less pilots required? I know that we've spoken about maybe the regionalisation of the industry, but do you think that there will be still a huge requirement in the future, like what we've seen on the trend? Do you think that will happen? Vicky?
Yeah, Mike. Well, from Project Sunrise point of view, if we're looking at 18 to 20-hour flights, we're looking at doubling our pilot capacity straight away. So, domestically, for example, would have 2 pilots in the flight deck, but travelling through from Perth to London, for example, we've got 4 pilots. We could be looking at having 5 to 6 pilots once we go to Project Sunrise. So, for example, the opportunity for more second officers coming through and flight engineers coming through, the opportunity for younger people to more quickly get into the airline industry, I think is most definitely there from the Qantas perspective because of Project Sunrise. So for sure, it's a great opportunity that we've got looking ahead. And I think that everything that Alan Joyce has been putting in place so far in directing and, looking at contracts, pilots' contracts and pushing Project Sunrise, he's achieving very, very quickly. And if COVID-19 hadn't have struck, we'd be looking at Project Sunrise operating from now and would really have expanded our pilots program. So as soon as this COVID-19 is done and dusted and the opportunity for us to fly internationally again, it's a huge opportunity for Qantas to continue to explore Project Sunrise.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, Chris, do you think that the trend will continue, the high trend will continue?
I do. If we take a medium-term view, absolutely, Mike. There was a change happening already in recent years, wasn't there, to higher volume of smaller aircraft, long-haul, single aisle. It was on anyway. As populations increase, the increase in the middle classes in certain countries by volume, populations are increasing. So I don't see that abating at all. So do I think it'll be a blip? Yeah, it might be. It's going to be a slow year or two, but I don't think it's going to stay that way, and not by any stretch of the imagination. By virtue of the university, we're also linked into the Qantas Future Pilot Program, which is actually a training program in itself, which funnels straight into Qantas, and we're still providing pilots into that program. So clearly, we're in the medium term, we're quite optimistic about the future there. But I really think, from a structural point of view, this change was happening anyway. Probably the very large aircraft may decrease by proportion, but certainly the long haul, high volume, higher service, frequency operations, I don't see that changing at all. Not with the new generation of lighter, smaller, medium, jets, Airbuses, and the smaller 737s.
Yeah. Well, Raj,
that will drive it.
Yeah. Well, Raj, your crystal ball, would you see the trends?
No, very similar. I think from an Indigo standpoint, Mike, we are committed to taking deliveries of planes that we were committing to take anyways. And that's going to be, in this year, we are talking of anywhere between 30 to 50 planes, even as we retire some of the old planes. Secondly, I think in the feeder markets and metro to non-metro within India, and one non-metro to another non-metro, we still see a lot of uptake for smaller planes like the ATRs. And there are not many trained pilots available for ATRs today. We still went to the Southeast Asian countries to hire from countries like Philippines and Indonesia. And that's a feeder pipeline my team and I are focused on. We were just about getting ready for a cadet program for the ATR fleet, and we would have launched it if not for COVID-19 coming, but we will still go and launch it. I think, we need to be ready for the future, Mike. We don't have a crystal ball, nor are we all futurists, but I do support the positivity that I see in the other countries, China, Vietnam, for example, and in other industries. So I think the last thing that, as an HR professional, I don't want to be doing is to not be ready for lapping up what's in the future. That said, the immediate future may not look all that encouraging, but if you were to even take a medium-term view, just about a year ago, Mike, we were all around the world. We went as far as Buenos Aires, Colombia, Chile, to go hire for pilots. Now, in a year's time, and a virus comes and says that you're not going to be doing anything more, doesn't appeal to my conscience. So I think the future's there. And I think this is where I think people like us will be seen as a lot of value adding to the corporation, to be able to foresee things that otherwise your accountant can't, because of the focus on cash.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've seen it myself with some airlines parking up their larger aircraft. It exactly says what you've all been saying, really, is the large long haul aircraft have been parked up. Prior to me coming to BAA Training as the head of training, I was flying the 737 MAX for Norwegian. And we were flying it from Dublin across to Hamilton in Canada, Providence in Rhode Island, and we were flying it to Stewart, which is a small airport just in upstate New York. And the aircraft was full. It was 189 seats. We were able to fill the MAX all the way across the Atlantic. The passengers absolutely loved it, but they were flying to exactly where they wanted to go. So I think this hub and spoke effort seems to be going, and the point to point with the smaller aircraft. So therefore, if they're going to have smaller aircraft, they're going to need more pilots to be able to operate this. So I think that the positivity is there. That would be my crystal ball, is that I think that there will be plenty of requirements and plenty of recruitment for pilots into the future. So look, we're coming towards the end of our chat, but there's one final question, and I'm pulling this one out of the hat. And it's if I want you to imagine that I was a 20-year-old school leaver, and I was going to join the airline, and I happened to meet you on the street. And what are you going to say to me? So are you going to encourage me to join the airline? Are you going to encourage me to invest my money in a flying school? What advice would you give to a young, impressionable individual who wants to get into aviation now? What would you say to them?
Mike, I would certainly say it, if that's where their heart is and that's where their passion is, you can never take that away from them, and they should be following their dream. And, all pilots, they're born to it. It's like a footballer is born to their football, and, a basketballer is born to their basketball. You just can't take their wings away. And if that's their dream, there's a huge amount of financial sacrifice to achieve it. There's a lot of giving up family time to achieve it. It is a huge give and take of your lifestyle. You are spending your life out of a suitcase and sleeping in a different hotel room most nights. You're away from home for long periods of time, and you're missing out on special events as well. So all of that has to be highly worth it. But, if that's where your heart and soul is in flying, then it's all worth it, because at the other end of it, we do have the flexibility of flying schedules, and you can ask for some time off, and you can meet those other needs, your own personal needs as well, and accommodate those people around you whilst following your dream and becoming a pilot. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for young people to become involved in now, looking to the future. And particularly in Australia, we have a wonderful climate ahead, both domestically and internationally. So, and we have, I would have to say, some of the best trained pilots in the world that fly for Qantas. So for those young people wanting to come and explore the opportunity within Australia, to be mentored by our Australian pilots, for example, is just such a great beginning for them as well. So good luck to them, and I would say come on board. Welcome.
Right, my CV is in the post, Vicky.
Great.
Right, Chris, it's your turn.
Yes. That's a hard act to follow, but I tell you what, I'd absolutely support everything Vicky said. I often address children or young people of just school age, just leaving school, and I'll tell them about my career. You've probably done the same thing. And I say to them, I've been doing this about 40 years, and with all the ups and downs, with all the associated stressors, with all those issues that go with it, I would do it all again. And, flying, as Vicky alluded to, you've got to love it. It's not something you go into just because it might be nice to do. There's an enormous commitment to it, career risk in terms of success or not. And usually and we find that through all educational institutions, the ones who are really committed will make it. If not, then they tend to drop out somewhere along the way. If they really, really want to do this, now is an excellent time, and they should pursue that, because there's nothing sadder than someone who never actually pursued their dream. I agree with Vicky in that regard. Now is a very good time. When I started all those years ago, my friends and a lot of people saying to me, "Oh, you'll never get a job. You'll never do it." Well, we did it. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Raj, what are you going to say to the young kids in India or in Southeast Asia when you go look at them to fly your ATRs? What are you going to tell them, or what are you going to say to them?
Yeah, it's not easy to follow the two of them, because I think they've said all the right things. The only thing I can add is being a pilot is a very high social status in my part of the world. Most pilot friends that I know of have made it to their standard of living by virtue of their occupation. And then they have their children who have gone into becoming pilots, etc. All I would say is if your dad has enough money to send you to a pilot school, go take advantage of it right now, because in a couple of months' time he's going to change his mind. So you may as well take it now. And yes, as a recruiter of pilots, I would think, oh my God, I'm going to get to recruit one person less, because I need to anyway be hiring all of them. So I can probably go hire this 20-year-old than dissuade him from him or her doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I think a lot of them, are a little bit reluctant, and I think the younger generation, the Generation Z, as we call them now, everything has to be very structured for them. So I think that the turmoil that they're witnessing with the pandemic is probably a little bit disconcerting for them, and there's probably a little bit of apprehension, I suppose, to get involved in it. But one of the things we teach pilots is resilience. We have to be resilient, and I think now, I suppose, the real thing is how to prepare for it now. Now is the time to get into aviation. Fuel is cheap. Training there should be plenty of scope and plenty of availability at schools. So. Yeah, I think it's all the same idea. We all have the same concept. Well, guys, listen, that's come to the end of it. I really appreciate your time. I think giving up of your time for some of these webinars is really well appreciated by me. I'd like to thank you for answering my difficult or maybe not so difficult questions. Vicky, many thanks to you, and best of luck with everything down in Qantas. Chris, really thanks as well to you for your answers and for your time as well. Raj, really appreciate it, and for giving a good insight into and I think, to sum it all up, I think we're all fairly positive about the future. Okay, there will be positions available after the COVID-19, and I think that the way to prepare for it is to get involved in aviation immediately, get into training now, because in 2 years' time, when you come out of it, or when you have your type rating completed, I think that there will be it'll be a changed market, it'll be a new normal, but it'll probably be a better normal. Okay, thanks very much for all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.